In today's episode of the Midweek Ramble, I'm going to be sharing with you 4 books, 3 fiction and 1 nonfiction, 3 of which are new to me, 1 of which I have read before, that appealed to both my reader side and my knitter side. So if that sounds like just your cozy cup of tea, get comfy and let's dive in. Hello, 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 and welcome to the Wool Needle's Hands Midweek Ramble. My name is Taylor, and I will be your host. I am a reader now. You guys, I've always sort of been a reader, but it was one of those things where I would put it down and I wouldn't do it, so I really couldn't qualify myself as a reader, but I have started a new habit for myself where I am reading consistently at least 30 minutes a day, but most of the time it's upwards of an hour a day, and I love this habit. I love having this going on with me right now. And I know that if you watch the recent episode of the podcast, or if you're a member of the Patreon, I've been talking about this, okay? So I thought, why not, because this is front of mind right now, it's like a new habit I'm embracing, why not talk a little bit about reading as it relates to knitting and my own personal interests. And I'm not going to be sharing, really in most cases, book reviews with you today, because 3 of the books I'm sharing with you today I have not read. They are new to me. But I'm sharing with you some books today that I've discovered that are piquing my interest as both a reader and a knitter, one of which I have read, and I'm going to be recommending that to you because I love the story. So that's what we're going to do today. I have pulled up in front of me my Goodreads and my Milanote board that has the links to these particular books on them, and I just want to share these with you because I know sometimes if you are a reader, but you also dabble in other things, you kind of want to blur the lines between those two, or at least have those two kind of blend into one another by finding a book about this other craft. And for me, typically it's easy to do that if you're looking for nonfiction books. If you happen to be a musician or a painter or a photographer or something, you can find some kind of nonfiction book that goes into detail about that craft. And when it comes to knitting, that's really easy to do. There are so many great nonfiction books out there. One I haven't read, but I'm going to share with you today that I think would be a great one for a knitter to read. But there's so many nonfiction books out there about knitting that you could very easily dive down that rabbit hole. And we're looking at you, Clara Parks. She has some great ones. And I would definitely recommend anything by Clara Parks. However, when it comes to fiction, if you tend to be a fiction reader, sometimes you want to dip your toes into fiction relating to the crafts that you also participate in. And so that's kind of where I'm going with this today. I thought it would be kind of fun to stick within this thing that's kind of front of mind for me right now and share it with you, because since I had my last episode of the podcast where I talked about getting into this habit of reading more, so many folks in the comment section were expressing their excitement and enthusiasm about that and about reading for themselves. And there are just so many of you that are avid readers. And I love that because I love being able to explore that here as kind of another facet of, you know, knitting and fiber arts and all of that. So that's what we're going to do today. Long story short, yeah, find me on Goodreads. I'm there. I'll link down below. I don't even know. Can I link to my Goodreads account? Just find me. You can put in my first and last name. You should be able to find me that way. Taylor Earl, for those of you who don't know, nice to meet you. But yeah, find me on there, and I'm going to start becoming much better about reviewing books that I've read. But let's go ahead and dive into it. Now, okay, so I know there are a lot of like cozy knitting mystery books. I know Debbie McComber, I believe that's how you would pronounce her name, is a big, knitting mystery or cozy knitting book writer. Now I can't say much because I haven't really read any of those. But from when I reading kind of the synopses of these books and then other people's reviews, there are certain, I don't know if I would call them like tropes or certain plot lines that I just don't spring for. And I think that a lot of these like cozy knitting mysteries or cozy knitting stories, even if they're not mysteries, kind of follow this very similar formula. And it's hard for me sometimes, it's hard for me to get into a book like that if it doesn't have some other kind of nuance that makes it interesting or has it stand out. And so I know that, cozy mysteries and things like that are a thing and definitely worth looking into. I have one that I'm going to share with you today that's the first book in a series that would qualify as like a cozy knitting mystery because it just really sounds intriguing. And based on the Goodreads reviews, it definitely piques my interest. But what I share with you today is kind of deviates from that plot trope, if that's a thing. Okay, so there's that. But recommend away in the comment section anything, regardless of what you think my preferences are, because I'm not the only person here. The comments are full of people, so recommend anything that you think a person might like in the realm of fiction and knitting, or whatever. Just drop your recommendations down in the comment section. Okay, so I want to get into this, and I think that the best way I could do this, because again, I've not read these books. They are books that I have just discovered on Goodreads. I've read some reviews and the synopsis, and that's how I'm going to share this with you. So I'm going to record my screen and share what I'm looking at with you, and we can kind of dive into this together. So bear with me while I get that going. Okay, so the first book that I discovered when I was searching, knitting and fiction books with knitting themes was this one called Arcanos Unraveled. And it's by Jana Gervra. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that, but it's called Arcanos or Arcanos Unraveled. The cover art was really interesting looking. Let's see can I like zoom in on that? It has this like really worn down look here, and it's not a very old book. So I don't really know if I'm assuming that's just what it's supposed to look like. Arcanos Unraveled came out in 2017. It's 288 pages, just a basic paperback book. But here's the synopsis. It says, meet Anya Winter, junior professor of magical textiles at Arcanos Hall. Thrown into exile with only her knitting needles and invisibility cloak, Anya teams up with a mysterious programmer to save her school and her reputation before it's too late. But can she really change the world with just a ball of yarn? Author Jana Gevra grew up on a sheep farm in northern Minnesota. Her first novel, Requiem in La Paz, was a finalist for the Colorado Gold Award. A former academic, she has taught creative writing in Scotland and film studies in the United States. Okay. Interesting. So this sounded cool to me because it kind of had a Harry Potter vibe, which also is what the book that I just finished, Ordinary Monsters, kind of has that similar vibe of a special school for magic and all of this. And it talks a lot about knitting, and that's actually kind of a primary theme in this story. So this was interesting to me. So I wanted to read some of the reviews. Now, this gets a 4.02 stars on Goodreads. I don't know why, but I have a hard time with anything. And this is like one of those, maybe don't read a book by its number of stars, or don't judge a book by its number of stars, but I have a really hard time with books below 3.7. Who am I to judge like that, right? And I know, like, there's actually a book I'm going to share with you today that is below 3.7. It gets 3.6 stars on Goodreads. And honestly, you really have to take that with a grain of salt, especially when you have a very few reviews, or even maybe a lot of reviews. I don't really know. But I look at this, it has 4 stars, 47 ratings, 10 reviews. I would say that that's pretty good. A 4-star rating on Goodreads is pretty good, in my opinion. So let's go ahead and read some of these reviews here. I'm curious. I tend that maybe this is something about me being like a pessimist, not a pessimist, like negative, but I feel like I like to start with the lower marks first because I don't know. I don't know why. Maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe I should start with the better reviews, but we're being real here. So I'm starting with this 2-star review here. I wanted to love this book. How can I not be drawn to a magical college hidden within my alma mater and a likable protagonist whose magic is all about knitting? So she says it's hidden within her alma mater. I don't know if that was clarified up here, but the book or the story, whatever this book is, Arcanos Hall, it's actually part of an actual college in real life. Meaning like an actual college that exists now in real life. It's like a part of that. So that must be what this person is referring to here. There was a solid arc for the first half of the book, and if the author had brought the story to a conclusion soon after, it would have been a 4-star read. Instead, the book drags on episode after episode, and I stopped caring. I'm looking forward to seeing more from this author in the future, hopefully with a tighter plot and more character development. Okay, a review like that to me is kind of, I don't know, like how much a story drags on or how much space between major points in a plot line there are and how that affects a particular reader, I think is very individual. I've read books that are very slow to progress, and then once they do progress, you're so happy that you went through all of that. So I take that with a grain of salt. That's not to me a deal breaker by any means. Okay, 3 stars. For disclosure purposes, I received a copy of Arcanos Unraveled through Goodreads giveaway. This story did not unravel, see what I did there, the way I thought it would. Jana Gevra's approach to magic is uniquely her own, easily weaving in the fantastical with the mundane. At times this story can be a little hard to follow, but only because I approached this with the same sense of comfort and familiarity that comes with the known. That's a really good way to put that. With a cast of relatable characters, with relatable histories, presents, and futures, Arcanos Unraveled is sure to be unlike anything fantastical you've read recently. P.S. The cover art is the cherry on top, as they say, adorably and wholly whimsical. I do really like that cover art. Okay, interesting. I like that review. That's a good review. Let's look here. 4 stars. I guess I'm just picking the first one that pops up when I click on the 4-star reviews. If I'm here for anything in this world, I'm here for the story of an adjunct professor at a magical college hidden within the University of Wisconsin. That's where I was going with this. I think I had read her review before. Who teaches enchanted textiles and does magical knitting. I love the mix of academic politics and magical education, and the protagonist is really likable and practical, my favorite kind of witch. Magical adventures and magical politics ensue as they are wont to do, and it is all very cute and fun. I hope to see more in this universe. I like that review. Okay, so that review was in 2018. I don't think anything else is coming out in this universe necessarily. Maybe, but that's a good review. All right. Let's do this one because I see Harry Potter mentioned here. This book is absolutely delightful. It's like a textile fiber crafting lover's Harry Potter. The magic system and the world building were really well done and both felt vivid and in-depth, especially considering that the book isn't terribly long. But at the same time, it didn't feel like work to absorb all of those details, which were woven, if you will, through an interesting, exciting story. I would think it's probably meant for a niche audience, but anyone with any knitting, weaving, spinning, shepherding interests will really get a kick out of this book. It was so fun to see some of the small, unique details of my crafts turned into pivotal aspects of a magical world. I liked the book enough that after reading it on my Kindle, I bought the paperback copy too. The cover art is so gorgeous that I want to keep it laying out, preferably on top of a basket of hand-spun yarn. Okay, so there you have it, guys. Arcanos Unraveled. This looks like a really great book of fiction with magic and mystery, and I love the idea of the politics involved in that, and the knitting, of course. Fiber arts. I love it. So that is the first one I wanted to share with you guys today. I added this to my want to read. I don't know why it's not showing up there. There it is. I added this to my want to read shelves because I would like to read this book, and I think it's great for all of us knitterly sorts. Okay, let's go to the next one. All right, this next one is nonfiction. Here we are. It's a short history of the world according to sheep. This one stuck out to me because I love the idea of learning about the history of existence and the world and people and all of that through one small facet of that world. Okay, so you're learning about the history of people and things like this and the world and how things work and operate through like the perspective of sheep and the sheep herding life, if you will. That sounds really convoluted. But this intrigued me, partly because, well, in big part because I am fascinated. I have so much appreciation for sheep ranchers, shepherds and shepherdesses, sheep shearers, the wool industry. I appreciate that. I support it wholeheartedly, and being able to learn more about that and how it goes back thousands and thousands of years in human history, I love that. It fascinates me and I want to know more. So this one is from Sally Coulthard. And it says, an addictively free-ranging survey of the huge impact that sheep have had on human history. From the plains of ancient Mesopotamia to the rolling hills of medieval England to the vast sheep farms of modern-day Australia, sheep have been central to the human story. Starting with our Neolithic ancestors' first forays into sheep rearing nearly 10,000 years ago, they've fed us, clothed us, changed our diet and languages, helped us to win wars, decorated our homes, and financed pioneers and privateers to conquer large swaths of the earth. Vast fortunes have been built on the backs of sheep and cities shaped by shepherds, markets, and meat trading. Sally Coulthard weaves the rich and fascinating story of sheep into a vivid and colorful tapestry, brimful of engaging anecdotes and remarkable ovine facts, whose multiple strands reflect the deep penetration of these woolly animals into every aspect of human society and culture. So I popped this into my want to read. It gets 4 stars here on Goodreads, and I want to look at some of those reviews with you. So we're going to head down here, starting with the 2 stars. I'm not going to start with the 1 star. Just start with the 2 stars. Okay? Okay. All right, so here's this first one by Shane. It's a great movie, by the way. Coulthard takes a journalistic approach in this book that puts itself forward as a history of sheep across the world. More accurately, it is a history of sheep and wool, mostly in England and with an occasionally nationalistic tone that interrupts the flow of the writing. The best sections are the ones where Coulthard is talking about sheep and not humans or wool. Her tone and humor are at these sections are pitch perfect, and some of the stories are fascinating. Her presentation of the non-human eye gives a nice introduction to the idea of sheep as a companion of humans on our long journey together. Unfortunately, those stronger sections are too few, and throughout the reading, the book makes some broad, unsubstantiated claims and often uses language clumsily. It's a pity because when it's good, it's really enjoyable. Interesting. Okay. Sally Coulthard's Kleingest. Oh, this is German. Yeah, it started off with, okay, I can't read that, I'm sorry. A critical point has been repeated in, can I translate that? Hold on. Can you translate things on this? You guys, I just am curious. We're gonna see if we can translate this. Come on, translate. All right. I don't want to, disregard it just because. Okay. Sally Coulthard's A Short History of Sheep is a pleasant diversion, but never rises above this level. Although I do not deny the work that went into the book and research, the selection of examples, the rather confusing structure, and unclear message make this book not very memorable. If possible, even more important in my mediocre appreciation and lukewarm reception is the ambition of the work compared to the results. A brief history of the world seems very quickly limited to Northwest Europe and especially the British Isles. The book may start with the Middle East and Central Asia and make an exception here and there, such as how Navajo Indians incorporated Spanish sheep into their community, but this remains primarily a book about the English sheep and the wool industry. That's interesting because I do have an interest. I mean, there's a lot of information out there about English sheep, Australian sheep, New Zealand sheep. I would love to know more about American sheep. And there's a great book for that is called Vanishing Fleece, and it's by Clara Parks. Good one to read about that. In itself, this should not have been an obstacle to giving this book a higher score, but if you write world in the title, then I'm not satisfied with a thinly veiled Anglo-centric narrative that links itself to the Middle East like every European secondary school history lesson structure, where everyone starts in Egypt and then only pays attention to their own region from the late Roman period onwards. Just to say, if you write an entire chapter about the iconography of the shepherd and shepherdesses and their romanticization, then surely there should have been a mention of Marie Antoinette, who occasionally role-played as a shepherdess on the grounds of Versailles, in her own archaic fantasy. It's too perfect an example to pass up, unless you really just want to talk about the British Isles. Okay, so I get where this particular reviewer is coming from. In conclusion, I can once again indicate that the book was quite pleasantly entertaining and the product quality as well as the translations are of a high standard. But from the point of view of learning qualities and message, the book is seriously lacking. Interesting perspective. Okay, interesting perspective. I want to go up to some of the higher ratings. Let's pop up to 4 stars for the sake of time. Let's just get to the good stuff, right? Thoroughly enjoyed this, even though I think the title of the book is a weak choice, a weak choice slash simply awful. Each chapters are about 20 to 30 minutes a read. I adore how organized this book is. Always a pleasure to have when it comes to nonfiction. The more you like sheep, the more you'll like this book. I took a star off from my rating because the ending felt a bit flat for me. There were some points made that felt a bit waffly. Regardless, I enjoyed every moment of reading this book. I especially enjoyed the chapters in which Coulthard explored the history of Vikings with important relevance to sheep. I wonder if the problem with the title, like the other reviewer suggested, is the breadth that is kind of suggested in that title, the history of the world. Perhaps it's just more narrow than that in reality, and that can kind of confuse people because you're getting a much more limited perspective. That's interesting, and that's something to consider too. But that's what reviews are for. You can kind of know this going in. The title is what it is, and it's not quite as broad as all of that. But it doesn't mean it's going to be a bad book. My family comes from a long line of sheep farmers in Oregon. Despite this, I know absolutely nothing about sheep. Zip, zero, nada. So this was a short and engaged history on the history of sheep, albeit a history that was very focused on England and Scotland than the rest of the world, ranging from ancient times to modern and covering contraptions like the myth of tartan and Aran sweaters and the Aran sweaters and the history of condoms and the rise of the Industrial Revolution, the cottage industry, child labor, and the enclosure laws, and much, much more. This book packs a lot into a short amount of time. Okay, so there you have it, a short history of the world according to sheep. Maybe not as broad as all that, but it seems like it does pack a bit of a punch in terms of giving you the history of sheep, especially as it relates to the British Isles and all of that. So otherwise, world might be a little bit of a stretch here. But nonetheless, I have this on my want to read because I think it would be a good start in that direction of learning more about the history of sheep and how they kind of shaped all of these facets of human life. So that's interesting. Okay, let's go on to the next one here. Okay, this next one is much more of a cozy, fun read. Now, I mentioned about cozy mysteries maybe not being for me. Well, this was one exception of a lot of the different synopses that I checked out. This is called The Vampire Knitting Club. Okay, now, I feel like I read a lot of reviews about this that gave me what I needed to feel good about this and to want to read more of this. Based on the cover of the book, this is not a book I would ever reach for. It's just not, okay? However, I would definitely give it a try, considering it's about knitting and it does have a fun plot. So let's go ahead and dive into this a little bit. It gets 3.9 stars on Goodreads, not bad. Vampires who knit, a troublemaking witch who killed Granny, and is she really dead? Bum, bum, bum. At a crossroads between a cringe-worthy past, Todd the Toad, and an uncertain future, she's not exactly homeless, but it's close, Lucy Swift travels to Oxford to visit her grandmother. With Gran's undying love to count on and Cardinal Wolsey's Gran's knitting shop to keep her busy, Lucy can catch her breath and figure out what she's going to do. I don't love that, the way that that's written. Except it turns out that Gran is the undying, or at least the undead. But there's a death certificate and a will leaving the knitting shop to Lucy, and a lot of people going in and out who never use the door, including Gran, who is just as loving as ever and prone to knitting sweaters at warp speed, late at night. What exactly is going on? When Lucy discovers that Gran did not die peacefully in her sleep, but was murdered, she has to bring the killer to justice without tipping off the law that there's no body in the grave. Between a hot 600-year-old vampire and a dishy detective inspector, both of whom always seem to be there for her, Lucy finds her life getting more complicated than a triple cable cardigan. The only one who seems to know what's going on is her cat. Or is it her familiar? Okay, so there's that. 262 pages, published in 2018. Let's see what people have to say. I'm kind of nervous to go into like the negative reviews on this one right off the bat, only because I kind of predict what people would say, right? But let's just take it with a grain of salt. The ones that are blurred, I'm not going to read because those include spoilers. Not a good book, but not bad enough. I won't read the next one. The conceit amuses me. Listen, if you're going to say something's bad, but you're going to admit to wanting to read the next one, I'm not taking that as a bad review. I'm just saying that that's like not your preference. Okay, so in my opinion, if this person's willing to read the next one, that's a decent review. Nancy Warren, The Vampire Knitting Club, in In the first in a series, Nancy Warren takes readers to Oxford, where a knitting shop seems to be the hub for paranormal activity in town. I don't love it when reviews include a summary. Like, I know the summary, I want your review. And perhaps it says it down here at the bottom. Okay, it says right here, I know this is not my usual read, but for the sake of Halloween bingo, I read one of these cozy mystery books a year, and they quite fun and a nice change from what I usually read. Okay, I can sum this book up as a pretty cute read with a side of murder that occurs. I also think that you can tell from the cover that the vampires within this book are not that scary, blood-sucking type. Actually, you find out pretty early on that they have a side hustle to get their blood supply and really a vampire knitting club. Okay. Additionally, I think that Warren did a good job in trying to throw as many suspects or red herrings as she could as to who the killer actually was. I did find myself changing my mind a few times, but was able to figure it out. Nevertheless, Warren does a good job with the mystery aspect. Okay, all right. Not bad. Let's go up to some of the better reviews. 4 stars. Let's just jump right on up there. OMG. When the first page of this book features the following line, you know things will only get better. Todd had stuck his salami in someone else's sandwich. Okay. All right. I see where that's going. I'm very pleased to report that I was right. This book has everything that you could want in a cozy mystery, engaging characters, a fun storyline, and humor. Lucy is so sweet. Instantly, I connected with her. In the wake of the death of her grandmother and an array of quirky characters, I thought she remained pretty level-headed. Then there is the man of mystery, Raph. He really is a man of mystery and talents. This includes knitting. Yes, he can knit. A skill that Lucy has yet to master herself. Now, I'm assuming this is a vampire? A hot vampire that can knit? Wow. I had such a fun time reading this book. If you aren't having fun reading a book, then walk away from it. A nice start to this series, which I can't wait to read the next books in the series and find out what new mischief Lucy and Raph find themselves in. The Vampire Knitting Club will have you in stitches from all the laughter you will have from reading this book. Okay, that's cute. First book in the Vampire Knitting Club series, Paranormal Cozy Mystery. Cute mystery where the granddaughter solves her newly turned vampire grandmother's murder. Imagine how fast you can knit with vampire powers. A sweater overnight, by hand. Fun and imaginative. I look forward to reading more of this series. Okay, so that is the Vampire Knitting Club. Cute, fun, easy read, probably super fast. No, I don't know, not a lot of challenge there, but it sounded cute. And I feel like of all of the mysteries and the murder mysteries and the knitting mysteries, this one just sounded fun to me. And I just don't read a lot of things like this. And maybe I should read more things like this. I mean, the closest thing I've read to this is Twilight, because there's vampires involved, which actually makes me think that I really want to read Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire. I've only ever seen the movie. Sidebar. Back to this. The Vampire Knitting Club, I added this to this list because it just sounds fun. Okay? It just sounds fun. But let's move on. There is another that I want to share with you. And this one I have read. And actually, a few years ago, I want to say 5 years ago now, I recommended this book and I attempted to do a kind of like a book club with this book on the podcast here. But this is called 3 Bags Full, A Sheep Detective a sheep detective story by Leonie Swan. I read this book ages ago. I can't remember exactly when I read this book. It was a long time ago. It was before I had kids. And it was when I first kind of got into knitting. Very fresh in my knitting career, if you will. Pre-podcast, all of that. And I read this and I really, really loved it. It was different. It's unusual. And at times it's kind of not difficult to read because the perspective, the point of view in this book is interesting. So this is a detective story from the perspective of sheep whose shepherd was found murdered. So the sheep discover the body of their shepherd. They kind of in their own animal, sheepy way determine that he has been killed. And it takes a long time for them to understand this because all of this is coming from sheep. So other than the fact that the sheep have been personified to the point that they communicate with one another and they have names and they kind of have, there's like a hierarchy within their flock. Other than that, everything is very is from an animal's point of view. So when they see their shepherd in the state, there's a lot of conversation about what's happened. When a human person would see what's happened to their shepherd and know immediately that there was foul play, they kind of take a little while to get to that point. And that's kind of how the book carries on. And I think that if you expect these sheep to carry on through this like detective story as humans would, with the kind of, you know, the expeditious way that humans work through things like this compared to how an animal would work through something like this, I think you can be disappointed at the pace. However, if you understand that this is all through the perspective of sheep, it really causes you to appreciate the pace of the story. I don't know. That's how I look at it. And I've read reviews from this before. It does get 3.6, which in my opinion, it's an average review for a book. But I think that's because maybe the pace is a little slow for some folks. I mean, it's a 340-page book. It's not a super long book. In fact, I have it here. This is it right here. It's paperback. Not a big book, right? But I love it. It's cozy. It's heartwarming. It's emotional. It's amazing how emotional you can be given the context of the book. It's great. So let's go ahead and get to the synopsis here. A witty philosophical murder mystery with a charming twist. The crack detectives are sheep determined to discover who killed their beloved shepherd. On a hillside near the cozy Irish village of Glenkill, a flock of sheep gathers around their shepherd George, whose body lies pinned to the ground with a spade. George has cared devotedly for the flock, even reading them books every night. Led by Miss Maple, the smartest sheep in Glenkill and possibly the world, they set out to find George's killer. The A-team of investigators includes Othello, the bad boy Black Ram, Mopple the whale, a merino who eats a lot and remembers everything, and Zora, a pensive black-faced ewe with a weakness for abysses. Joined by other members of the richly talented flock, they engage in night-long discussions about the crime, wild metaphysical speculations, and embark on reconnaissance missions into the village where they encounter some likely suspects. Along the way, the sheep confront their own all-too-human struggles with guilt, misdeeds, and unrequited love. Funny, fresh, and endearing, it introduces a wonderful new breed of detectives to the reader. I love this book. So let's go ahead and read some of the reviews here. We'll go ahead and start with the 2-star review. It's a cute premise. A dead shepherd is discovered by his flock of sheep with a spade sticking out of his chest, and the sheep then set out to solve the mystery of the shepherd's murder. Fine, I have no problem with cute. The problem with this book is that it's just not a very good mystery, despite the billing. The cues are often garbled in translation from human to sheep and back again, such that the reader loses a clear sense of what's actually happening. The clues we do have don't add up to much, and the author does little to try to bring it all together, and in the end, the solution has really nothing to do with the entire setup of the story. So yes, it's cute, but it's also a poorly conceived and told mystery with a terribly disappointing resolution. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. If you take this book at face value and just as a detective story, and you think that there's going to be some kind of compelling mystery here that keeps you guessing all the way until the end, I feel like you're already setting yourself up for disappointment, because that's not really what this is. It does have a sense of that. There are things about it that are mysterious. You don't necessarily know who the killer is right off the bat, and it's not, in my opinion, outright obvious. And I think that the way that the sheep talk about the clues is supposed to be kind of muddled because they're sheep. You're supposed to feel kind of disconnected from them because they're coming from this from a whole different perspective than what you would have, right? So I think that in that sense, it's done really well, but I think that that's not really, people don't catch on to that, and so they just think that there's some flaw with the story or the plot, whatever. So interesting review, but I do feel like that only kind of, I don't know, emphasizes what I'm saying here. In my opinion. My first impression of this book was, it reminded me of the curious incident of the dog in the nighttime, in the sense of an unlikely detective solving a crime. It was probably with this book that made me not enjoy this. It was probably with this thought that made me not enjoy this book as much as expected. While there is some very interesting concepts in this book, it has a very philosophical theme throughout of this book. I thought the author padded the book a little too much. While the sheep made for very interesting and enjoyable characters, I felt that they were the only part of the book that I actually enjoyed. In the end, I just felt the book was too cutesy for my liking. I don't think it's too cutesy. I honestly think that I could see where someone would think that, but I don't think that. It's charming, and we tend to naturally think that there's a cutesy element because they're sheep. You got to read the book. I almost want to read it again because it's so much more than that, and I think that that's not looking deep enough into the story to think that it's too cutesy. Sorry, just my opinion. Okay, we're going to go up to some of the higher ratings. We're going to pop right up to the 4 stars here. Okay. Ugh, I don't know, guys. I just love this one. Okay, this one here. This is one of the weirdest books I have ever read in my short life. No, honestly, if you are tired of cliche, tired of fairy tale retellings, tired of love triangles, tired of the usual average book, try this one. You will not be disappointed. I know the rating is not encouraging, but that's because it's not everybody's cup of tea. Yes, exactly my point. The reason? Sheep. Yeah, sheep. The book's main characters, Miss Maple, Othello, and Mopple the Whale. Sheep. The POV? Yeah, right, sheep. The dead body, their shepherd. And the murderer? Not telling you. Go and give it a try. That's a great review for this book. I'm telling you, it's great. I never thought I would find myself commenting in a book review about how realistic the sheep characters seem to be, but in Leonie Swan's delightful murder mystery, I repeatedly found myself thinking, yes, I bet that's exactly what a sheep would think. Yes, I agree. I'm telling you guys. While these crime-fighting sheep are smart and understand English, they are still just so sheepy that I had no trouble losing myself in their world. The author's depiction of flocks attempt to make sense of certain quirks of human behavior from a sheep's perspective was particularly well done. Besides, how can you not love a novel that has a flip book built into it? Yes, that's another really cool thing about this. I'm gonna see if I can do it here, but down at the bottom corner here. I don't know, hold on, let's see, how can I, here. Can you, this way. How do you do this backwards? Okay, watch the pages at the bottom. Can you see it? Is it doing anything? Yeah, there's like a little flipbook element at the bottom, which is really adorable. Okay, so I love this review. I feel like this one, I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording my screen now, but I feel like that review, those last two, it's very much how I feel about this book. I feel like what I like about this book may be what causes other people to give it a poor review. Because everything is coming from the sheep's perspective, and I feel like the author does such a great job tapping into what that perspective would be if we could read into it, right? So I really love this. And that's what I wanted to share with you guys today. I did some digging around in Goodreads. I had a little bit of fun with this, and I also kind of pulled from a tip line submission a while ago about knitting related fiction books. And I don't feel like I addressed everything that tip asked about, because they were asking about like cozy murder mysteries and things like that, but it did get me thinking about this, especially now in this fresh kind of phase. I don't want to call it a phase, but these new habits I'm building about reading every day. If you want to hear me talk more about that, check out the latest episode of the podcast. But I'm excited about these 3 books. Like I said, I have added them to my want to read list on Goodreads. This book here, 3 Bags Full, the one that I have actually read, I have 2 copies of this. And this is what I would like to do. I would like to give away a copy of this book. This one I have here is the one that I read. It's pretty beat up, not the greatest condition, but this is the one that I read. And this one, I'm not sure why I have this one, unless I purchased it thinking that I no longer had this other one. But I have 2 copies. It has some pink staining on the front. I'm not exactly sure what that is. Part of me thinks it's candle wax. I'm not exactly sure, but this is an extra copy, and I would like to give this away to someone. I do not do giveaways here on the YouTube channel. I don't like to do those down in the comment section because it causes the weird bot wolves to descend on the video. So what I do is I will host it over on Patreon, and if you would like to enter for my copy that I can give away of 3 Bags Full, you don't have to be a paying patron over there. Just head over to the Patreon and you can provide your comment in the post with these. You'll see the post on Patreon. You'll know which one it is. Provide your comment down below, and then I will choose randomly from those commenters so that I can send away a copy of my copy of 3 Bags Full. That's what I would like to do. I'd like to give this away. And better yet, I am going to paint a bookmark. Over on Patreon, I posted a Patreon exclusive video where I kind of jabbered a little bit about small creative expression while I was painting a couple bookmarks. There's a part 1 and a part 2 that's coming soon, and it kind of got me into the mood of painting some really cute bookmarks. I painted these bookmarks that you see right here, and I'm going to paint one and stick it in this book, wrap it up, and send it off to somebody who comments over on that post on Patreon. And I think that'll be kind of fun and a great way to send off a book that I have 2 of, because I don't need 2 of this book. Well, that's it, guys. I just wanted to share with you some of these books because this whole reading habit thing is front of mind for me right now, and I'm really excited about it. And why not share some books that also bring together both, you know, our interest in reading and our love for knitting and fiber arts and all of that. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. This has been lovely. I hope you're having a wonderful day. And if you took value from today's video or enjoyed yourself at any point, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. Definitely subscribe and click the bell icon so you can be notified anytime I upload new content, which is every Wednesday and every Sunday. And if you would like to help support the work that I'm doing here at the Wool Needles Hands YouTube channel and the content that I create for this channel twice every week, definitely consider heading over to Patreon and becoming a patron. Your support makes all of this possible, and it means more than you could possibly know, so thank you very much. Until I see you again for Sunday's episode of the podcast, or perchance even sooner than that, if I decide to squeeze in another episode between now and then, happy knitting, happy making, happy reading, or whatever it is that you're doing. Take care, be well, and I will see you soon. Bye.